So, what does it mean to urinate publicly? Well, as one might guess, public urination is the act of peeing in a public space. Um, so the way that this is typically done is that someone will find a place where people probably won't be, people probably aren't looking, and they'll just try and urinate as fast as possible to avoid being caught. The kind of person who usually does this is someone who's it's usually someone who's been out drinking, they can't find a washroom in time, um, they're unable to hold it in before they can get to one, and so they just find, some random wall, some random corner, that kind of deal. It's also common in the homeless community, given that it's kind of hard to find bathrooms that are open to like non-customers or just public bathrooms in downtown areas. So I will be talking more about how this law specifically affects them, but it does affect them more than some other people. And then where does this occur? Due to the nature of this crime, it can pretty much occur in any public space, just anywhere that you're walking around in public where people shouldn't be peeing is where someone could publicly urinate. And then why do people do this? Well, sometimes the risk of being caught seems to outweigh the embarrassment and hassle of peeing yourself. But who's the victim here? The victim could be anyone who happens to stumble upon the act, given that they are unable to have consented to seeing someone publicly urinate, just due to a lack of prior knowledge, just because they had no clue. They can't consent to having seen that. So it's always something that they weren't expecting. And then also, depending on where it happens, um, how much there is, there could be some leftover remnants that may leave some odor. Someone could step in it. Just it might be unsightly. And so and anyone who happens to interact with any remnants of someone who publicly urinated, they're also a victim because that is, it's inconvenient for them. They also couldn't consent to that. And then also, when I get into why it's illegal, there is sort of a danger that comes with leaving your urine everywhere. So, getting to how long it's been illegal, or when it became illegal, different countries, different nations have had it all be illegal for who knows how long, for a super long time, for various reasons. According to Herodotus, a Greek writer, way back in the 5th century BC, he in one of his writings he made a specific note that it was illegal in Persia to publicly urinate, and this was due to a decency standard. And most laws concerning public urination were initially founded on a standard of public decency. And you can, when I was researching this, I saw even in places that had public bathhouses, like Rome, they still had laws concerning public urination. Time and a place for everything. But then we learned that leaving your urine and your feces everywhere kind of contributes to the spread of disease. And so then the laws about public urination started to have this public health premise. And that's why earlier when I mentioned people who were just wandering about and happened to encounter a spot in which someone has publicly urinated, there's also a danger to them because they don't know what's in there. Maybe something could be getting them sick if they accidentally come into contact with it. Someone steps in something, checks out the bottom of their shoe, tries to wipe it off, touches their face later. It could just be an issue. So there's a couple of reasons why it's illegal. If you get caught urinating in public, the consequences change pretty widely. Well, within a certain range, but there's no like set punishment for committing this crime. So, according to Texas Penal Code Section 482.01, it's a Class B misdemeanor. You could be fined up to $2,000. It's usually just a fine. They usually don't really book people or, hit them hard for urinating in public because, like I said, it usually is just someone who's drunk or a homeless person who didn't really have another option. So when it comes to disciplining them for that infraction, it's usually just a fine. But given that it's a Class B misdemeanor, if you're a repeat offender, you could spend time in county jail. You could be sentenced to probation or community service. And then, if you are caught red-handed in the act, the police officer can actually charge you with indecent exposure or public lewdness, depending on where you live. And then, if a child happens to stumble upon you, or say a family stumbles upon you and there's a child with them, then you can be charged as a child sex offender, and that could be combined with indecent exposure or that separate individual from indecent exposure. Either of those could land you on the sex offender registry list. So peeing in peeing in public or public urination can have some pretty dire consequences, given that if you do land yourself on the sex offender registry, you have to just hold that for the rest of your life, and people can look that up, and there's no nuance online. It just says this person is a sex offender. So, you know, urinating in public has some harsh consequences depending. And then here's this video that I have just talking about how some people are dealing with this ongoing problem of public urination.
20 Millionen Besucher
In St. Pauli, anything goes, from prostitution to late-night drinking. But one thing really upsets locals: men urinating in the streets and alleys of this famous district of Hamburg.
It's really getting on my nerves. It's really getting on my nerves. Just don't do it.
But now community leader Julia Staron is helping the people of St. Pauli bounce back, literally. She's painting district walls with this high-tech ultra-ever-dry super hydrophobic paint. Developed by car maker Nissan, its oleophobic nano coating is water repellent. Revellers who urinate against it end up soaked.
This paint repellent has helped, of course. There are other products, but we've had very positive experiences with this particular brand.
She's convinced that the paint will change men's behaviour, in conjunction with her bilingual warning signs. It costs $500 to paint a 6 square metre area. But Staron is convinced it's worth it, and says the drip of publicity is already helping.
So that's just one way that people are trying to discourage others from urinating in public. So, should it be illegal? And in most cases, I would agree that it should be illegal, it should stay illegal, because there are very few good reasons to urinate in public. And like I said, there is sort of that health component to it. However, I think there is a bit of a gray area concerning this, because the homeless population disproportionately suffers from laws concerning public urination. There was a study done where it was a survey study on the New York homeless population, and 15% of them reported being arrested for public urination, and 40% of the homeless population of New York at that time was reporting that they had been harassed by the police for it. So this law, on paper, it seems good, because with this law, you don't have to worry about catching anyone peeing if it's unsightly to you. You don't have to worry about stepping in anything weird, right? But then you have this group of people who have very limited means to take care of this basic human need, and they're being punished for doing something that everyone else does because they're unable to do it where most people do it. And so at that point, you're just punishing them for being homeless, which, there's a couple of issues that you might run into with that, because they're just trying to do something that everyone else does. It's hard to find public restrooms in downtown areas where homeless populations are concentrated. It's hard to find bathrooms that aren't restricted to customers, and especially in a time like this where a lot of public places have really strict rules about who's allowed to go in or how many people can be in at a time or whatever. Because of the ongoing pandemic, these homeless people are suffering from laws like this. And I I think it should be illegal, but I think there should be some kind of wiggle room with it. I don't know how you can institutionally implement a wiggle room as far as what the police will do when acting with someone, but I don't think that we should just have a hard ban on public urination if there's, I don't know, some proper way to go about it. Something else that I ran into during my research was that sometimes police will just walk up to people who are adjusting their zipper and start harassing them or giving them a hard time about public urination, whether without knowing for sure if someone was going to or was not. Like, people have been fined for adjusting their zipper because the police thought they were going to urinate publicly. And I think that it's a little unfortunate that a law which on paper is supposed to just protect the general public from that is being used to sort of, I don't know, strong arm people like that. So I think there should be some sort of gray area with the way this is handled. But that is the whole thing on public urination.